Hello everybody and welcome back to Transformers TCG Deck Techs, where we dare to think outside the box and we have fun doing it. My name is Jimmy and today I am bringing you an extremely defensive deck. I kind of sought out to see how well a deck can play defense, and obviously it's going to have a lot of blue in it. It's going to have a lot of tough in it. In this particular deck there is a ton of card draw, and towards the end of the game we start to snowball out of control, and it's very difficult for your opponent to stop this deck once it gets going. But we'll go ahead and start looking at the characters, and the first character we're going to look at is in a lot of decks that try to play defense, and that's Flamewar. And I know we see Flamewar a lot, but it's with good reason. Her bot mode ability is the ability we're looking for, and it reads each of your characters has tough 1. So on your first turn, you flip Flamewar to bot mode, and all of your characters have tough 1 until she's either removed from the game or, she flips over to her alt mode side, which we're not going to be doing with this deck because her alt mode ability reads, when you flip to this mode, each of your characters gets bold 1 until end of turn. We're probably never going to be flipping to this mode. Because, we don't have much orange in the deck at all. I think there's actually only 2 orange icons throughout the deck. So this ability is not going to be very useful. So, we're going to flip her to bot mode, and we're going to keep her there for pretty much the entire game. Now, there's a character that came out in Wave 2 that I've been using a lot with Flamewar. And basically, the reason I'm using this next character is because when you flip Flamewar to bot mode on your first turn, obviously you need to attack with somebody in alt mode. And that character is going to be Dead End. And the reason for that is in alt mode, he has tough 1. Now, obviously he only has 2 attacks, so he's probably not going to deal much damage, if any damage at all, on the first turn. But he's really there just to soak a lot of early damage for our characters. And, again, obviously he only has 7 health, but, when you flip Flamewar to bot mode, you attack in alt mode, they're attacking back into a character that already has tough 2. So, flipping 4 cards with a lot of blue, he's going to be able to take, a lot of damage. In bot mode, he has an ability that says when you flip to this mode, draw a card. Now, this deck does like to draw cards, and a lot of them. But, until we get our defenses set up, we're probably not going to flip to bot mode. Much with Dead End, unless it's really the only flip that we have available. Now, the next character, he might be hard to get, so if you don't have him already, I actually have a couple of other suggestions that I'm going to show in the video, but the character is Nemesis Prime. I wanted to build a deck around Nemesis Prime that wasn't a double primes deck, only because I feel like he doesn't really get much love outside of that deck. But his alt mode ability says when you flip to this mode, your opponent chooses one of their characters and deals 2 damage to it. So free damage is great. Even if the opponent gets to choose where it goes, being able to whittle down, your opponent's characters is great. But his bot mode side is the one that everybody talks about, and it's with good reason. It's very powerful. And it reads, when you reshuffle your scrap pile into your deck, put the bottom card of your deck face down under this. This has +3 damage for each card under him. So, this deck likes to draw a lot of cards. So you're going to have a lot of cards in your hand, which means your deck is not going to have many cards in it to go through. So you're actually going to be reshuffling your deck a lot with this deck. But like I said, Nemesis Prime is a super rare, so not everybody is going to have access to Nemesis Prime, so I have some suggestions if you don't have him. The first suggestion is Sunstorm, and it's for his bot mode ability. And it reads, this character's attack is equal to the number of cards you have in hand. Now, with playtesting this deck, obviously early game, you're not going to have a whole lot of cards, but because of the amount of card draw that's in this deck, late game, I was having 18, 20 cards in my hand. So having a character that has 18 to 20 damage just because you have that many cards in your hand is great. Now, his alt mode ability is going to kind of help us out in the early game when we are trying to play cards to set up our defense. And that reads, when you flip to this mode and you have fewer than 3 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. So if you're playing the deck using Sunstorm, You can go ahead and play, a couple extra cards, if you feel that you need to. Typically, if you're playing the Nemesis Prime version, you're going to want to hold on to cards just so you can build your hand up. But that's a great ability to have to make sure that you can keep cards in your hand in the early game. So Sunstorm is the first suggestion. The second suggestion is from Wave 2. It's also a rare, but it's still easier to get a hold of than Nemesis Prime. And that's Bombshell from Wave 2. And it's for his bot mode ability, and it says, when this attacks, you may scrap cards from your hand equal to the number of stars on the defender. If you do, KO the defender. So with the amount of card draw, again, in this deck, it's very easy to, have 15 to 20 cards in your hand towards the end of the game. So with that many cards in your hand, you can pretty much KO anything. Obviously, he's going to have a difficult time KOing Metroplex or Omega Supreme and the combiners. But, the other characters in the game, he's going to have a much easier time taking out. And on the alt mode side, it says when you flip to this mode, draw a card. So again, drawing cards is very key to having Bombshell work. But, just being able to draw cards and being able to knock out opponents just by discarding cards is fantastic. Now, with Bombshell and Sunstorm, they are 1 star less than Nemesis Prime. So I would recommend, replacing any one of these cards that's in the deck with like a Leap of Faith or even a Vandalize would work. But I'll go ahead and leave that up to you. So that is the team. So now we'll start looking at the deck, and we'll start with, kind of the boring cards, I guess. The first card we're going to look at is Handheld Blaster. In heavy defensive decks, this is kind of like a necessary evil because it has 2 blue icons. But it's a weapon that gives your character bold 1. We're not going to be playing this as an upgrade pretty much ever in this deck. I mean, sure, it might help, get through your deck so Nemesis Prime can trigger, but, this is in here primarily for the 2 blue icons, and there are ways to get this out of your hand in this deck if you happen to draw this. But because it has 2 blue icons, I put 3 copies of Handheld Blaster in the deck. Okay, so the next card is not so boring, but this is, the first card of several that's going to really help us with our defense, and that's Reinforced Plating. And it's an upgrade armor that gives our character Tough 2. So, with as much blue as we have in this deck, any amount of Tough is going to be great. If we have Flamewar in bot mode and we put this on one of our characters, they're going to have Tough 3. And if we put it on Dead End while he's in, alt mode, he's going to have Tough 4. So, just by playing one card, we're going to increase, the defense of one of our characters pretty substantially. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Reinforced Plating in the deck. The next card, which is along the same lines, is Sparring Gear. And again, this is just an armor that gives our character Tough 2. So it works in the exact same way as Reinforced Plating, but this has a green icon on it. So if for whatever reason, your armors are getting, destroyed, or you're just not drawing them for some really crazy reason, you're going to be able to put this in your hand when, you flip them off the top when attacking or defending. This is the only card that we have in the deck that has an orange icon. So, there might be an occasion where you flip this and add 1 damage to your character, but I really wouldn't bank on it. But because it does have a green icon, we went ahead and just put 2 copies of Sparring Gear in the deck. The next card is also an armor, and that's Evasive Maneuvers. This is an armor that gives your character Tough 3. So, that's exceptional, when your characters already have Tough. Again, Flamewar in bot mode, along with this, gives your character Tough 4. But unfortunately, after the upgraded character defends, you scrap this card. So, that's fine, because if you have this on your character, depending, of course, on the, how much offense your opponent has, your character is going to be shrugging off almost all, if not all, damage that he's going to receive that turn. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Evasive Maneuvers in the deck. The next card is Security Console. And this has a white icon, so we're going to be able to flip additional cards when we flip this. But it's a utility that reads, when the upgraded character defends, draw a card, and then plan one. So this is a way that we can get Handheld Blaster out of our hand, and it's an excellent way because, we're doing this on defense. So, if you put Handheld Blaster on top of your deck, you're going to be flipping at least 2 blue icons. But there's a lot of times where, I would draw the card but then not plan, only because, I want to try to fill my hand as quickly as possible so that we can get Nemesis Prime to trigger as often as possible. But since this is such a great card and we don't have, many utilities in this deck, I went ahead and put 3 copies of Security Console in the deck. The next card is going to help us punch through some damage, and that's Energon Axe. And it says put on damage characters only, which even though we are playing a very defensive deck, we are going to be taking damage. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Through playtesting, even against other blue decks, you're dealing with Pierce. There's, direct damage out there. Your characters will take damage. But, this gives our character +3 damage and Pierce 2. So, the +3 damage is okay. I mean, that's really good. But we're really looking for the Pierce damage out of this card. But, if we put this on Nemesis Prime, with, having 7 attack in bot mode, he's going to be swinging for at least 10 damage when you have this equipped. But I went ahead and put 3 copies of Energon Axe in the deck. The next card, which works somewhat similarly, is Scoundrel's Blaster. And it's a weapon that you put on Decepticons only. All of our characters are Decepticons, so we're fine there. And it says, while the upgraded character is attacking an Autobot, it has Pierce 2. And this also gives +2 damage. So, against Autobots, this is really good. Against, Decepticon decks, not so much, unless you put it on Nemesis Prime. But, this has a green icon, so we're going to be able to put this into our hand when we flip cards. And it has a blue icon, so that's really good. But because of the green icon, we just had 2 copies of Scoundrel's Blaster in the deck. The next card is going to help us push through damage with our little guys, and that's Piercing Blaster. And it has a white icon, and it's a weapon that gives our character Pierce 3. Now, on Flamewar, she has 3 natural damage on her bot mode side, so that's great for her. Dead End, however, only has 2 natural damage on his alt mode side. So there's going to be times where we'll flip Dead End to bot mode to A, draw a card, and then B, have the additional +1 damage that he has on his alt mode side so we can get the full guaranteed 3 damage from this weapon. But since we really don't need to see this that often, I went ahead and just put 2 copies of Piercing Blaster in the deck. Okay, so that's all the upgrades. So we'll go ahead and start looking at the actions. And the number of stars in this deck so far with the characters comes up to 22 stars. So I had to find a card that has a star on it, and that's going to be Universal Network Access. And it's an action that has a blue icon that says draw 3 cards. This deck loves to draw cards, so this is, probably the best card draw option that we have. So I went ahead and put 3 full copies of Universal Network Access in the deck. The next card, which also draws us cards, but it can also filter our hand, and that's Inspiring Leadership. It's got a blue icon, and it's an action that says draw 3 cards, then scrap 2 cards from your hand. So there was actually a few times, actually last night when I was playing the deck, where I had so many cards in my hand that when I was flipping off the top to play defense with the amount of tough that I had, I was running out of cards in my deck. I mean, that's insane. But, if that happens, this kind of works well with that because you could basically draw cards and scrap cards into your scrap pile when you have no cards in your draw pile, and immediately shuffle those cards into your draw pile, which would trigger Nemesis Prime. It only happened a couple times, so I wouldn't bank on that. This is really purely in here to, dig 3 cards deeper into your deck. But I went ahead and put 3 copies of Inspiring Leadership in the deck. The next card, which is also a card draw card, is Pep Talk. And it's got a blue icon, and you draw 2 cards with it. obviously it's not as powerful as Universal Network Access, but, still, this is a very strong card, especially in this deck, since we do want to draw as many cards as possible. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Pep Talk in the deck. The next card can actually get insane towards the mid to late game, and that's Equipment Enthusiast. And it has a white icon, and it says draw a card for each of your upgrades. So, obviously we're going to be playing a lot of upgrades on our characters, especially armors. And through playtesting, it wasn't, unheard of for me to, draw 6 cards with this card. So that's just incredible. But because we don't really want to see this in the early game, because we're not going to have many upgrades on our characters, I went ahead and just put 2 copies of Equipment Enthusiast in the deck. Okay, so I think that's enough card draw for the deck. But the next card that we're going to look at is going to help us play multiple actions in a turn, and that's Brainstorm. And it's got a blue icon. It's an action that says you may play an action, then you may play another action. So imagine, having 6 upgrades on the table and brainstorming 2 Equipment Enthusiasts back to back. You just drew 12 cards. And I've done that multiple times with this deck. So it's not like it's a, fairy tale Christmas land type situation. It happens a lot. But, if not, using Equipment Enthusiasts with a bunch of upgrades on the table, chaining 2 Universal Network Accesses together is still very, very good. So I went ahead and put 3 copies of Brainstorm in the deck. The next card is going to help us deal with opposing upgrades, and that's Vaporize. And it's an action that says scrap an enemy upgrade. Obviously there's going to be times where we want to take care of opposing upgrades, especially any upgrades that would grant Pierce to the attacker, because we want to try to, survive as long as possible. Pierce is our, main Nemesis against this deck. So we want to be able to have an ability to take out those types of upgrades, but because I want to keep this deck to 40 cards, I only put 2 copies of Vaporize in the deck. And the last card, which kind of coincides with Handheld Blaster, and it's Security Checkpoint. And it's an action that reads, each player reveals their hand and scraps all upgrades from it. This is in here, again, for the 2 blue icons. The only time that you would probably ever play this is if you drew it really early in the game and, you don't have any upgrades in your hand. So it doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. So you may play this action, but, probably 9 times out of 10, you won't be playing the action part. But because it does have 2 blue icons, we went ahead and put 3 copies of Security Checkpoint in the deck. Okay, guys, so that's the deck that I've been playing for the past couple weeks. It is very, very strong. I've played it against multiple types of decks, heavy blue decks with Pierce, extremely heavy orange bold decks, and also balanced decks that have, quite a bit of static damage and some trickery to them. But this has been a deck that's been able to withstand a lot of opposing decks. So, again, hopefully you have Nemesis Prime, because I think that he's the best fit for the deck. But if not, I do hope that you have either Sunstorm or Wave 2 Bombshell to substitute for him. But, I hope you enjoyed the deck. Please like and subscribe. Check out my Patreon account, which information's in the description. And, until next time,